Nehemiah, like I said, interesting character in the Bible. I like Nehemiah, always have, because he was a man who did what he did, not because God necessarily, how should I say that the right way? God didn't personally tell him to go do it. He did it because he was convicted by Scripture, convicted to do what he thought that needed to be done for God. And I always think that's an amazing. Ezra and Nehemiah are both kind of in that same idea. We talk a lot more. Nehemiah is probably more popular than Ezra for several reasons. But I think that Nehemiah was a man who probably he bit off a huge job. I don't know if you've ever like been a foreman or a boss, but whenever you kind of set out to do something, a project, whatever that project may be, sometimes it's hard to foresee everything that's going to go wrong along the way. And it's easy. It's just like in the church. It's easy to say, well, we're going to have a volunteer day, We're all going to come down here and we're going to work on the building. That's great. That's a great thing to do, right? Good intentions. We're all going to get down here. We're going to do work on the building. So everybody gets down here to work on the building. And then guess what? You find out that, well, we really don't have what we need here to work on the building. And we really don't have things in place to really accomplish it. And we really don't have guys and women that are in the right place to do the jobs they're best to do. And so, to have a day here to say, let's go work at the building, that day should probably start a month before we actually come here to work on the building, because we ought to make a list of everything that needs to be done, right? We need to get all the materials we need to accomplish whatever task that may be, right? And we need to get people in place over each one of those projects that is qualified to oversee that project. And then guess what? You have a whole lot of people show up to help because everybody loves to help, and we'll actually have something for them to do, right? Instead of sitting around here looking at each other because we really don't have anything. It was a great intention. The point I'm trying to make is Nehemiah went back to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. The walls were crumbled. The walls have been torn down. The walls have been destroyed. Jerusalem had been destroyed. The gates that were wooden had all been burned down. There were none of them left. There's a lot of gates going into the city. Big gates, little gates, all kinds of gates. And so all this had been torn down, reduced to rubble. And so Nehemiah had great intentions. I'm going to go back. I'm going to rebuild this wall. And that was a noble thing to do. And Nehemiah had resources. The king had provided him with a certain number of resources to go back and to do it. But Nehemiah, when he got there, he found the task was daunting. He had never been there. He just knew they were torn down. He'd never actually seen it, right? So when he gets there, as we talked about last time, he goes out by night, he rides around, he sees all this desolation, he says, so then he goes, he talks to him, he says, we're going to rebuild the wall. Great, we're all going to go rebuild the wall. But guess what? Have you ever really started on a big project, and when you get into it a little bit, you think, I'm never going to get this done, right? This is just too much. This is too big of a job. These walls, the rubble was ridiculous. These walls have been totally destroyed. The walls that Nehemiah will build back, I'll give you an idea so you kind of get an idea of the scope of this project. The wall, there's like 20 or 30 something gates, but on top of that, these rock walls were 9 feet thick. So this isn't a little deal. All these stones were strewn, were laid everywhere, and you got to say, now we're going to go rebuild it. Well, that's all good. So they get started rebuilding the walls. But then guess what? You have all these problems, which is where we're at tonight. You have problems outside. You have problems inside. You have problems from everywhere, right? Because guess what? A lot of the nations around you don't want the walls rebuilt, number one, because they see Jerusalem, Judah as a threat. And they see this is a bigger threat. Once these walls are rebuilt, they become a force to be reckoned with. They don't want these walls rebuilt. So there's a lot of things going on. And Nehemiah, little old Nehemiah, He is in the middle of having to do all this. But he turns out Nehemiah is a great supervisor. And I think and like I said last time, I always learn lessons. Every time I look at Nehemiah, I always learn lessons. And like I said last Sunday morning, you know, Nehemiah, number one, Nehemiah prayed for almost 3 months, right, before he even approached the king that he was going to go back. So he put it before God first. He put it before God. Nehemiah took the king's aid, right? He didn't refuse it. He took it. He even took the protection going back to Judah. He accepted what the king had to offer. He wasn't too proud to accept help, which I think that's a big lesson in the book of Nehemiah. He wasn't a proud man. He was a humble man. He was humble enough to accept help. And on top of that, Nehemiah approached this thing in an organized fashion. He had all this material he was taking back, gold, silver, wealth. He distributed that among different people. And then he weighed it all when they got to Judah. So he didn't put all his eggs in one basket, right? He separated it out. He separated the wealth out. He was thinking ahead. When he got to Jerusalem, instead of blowing the horn and saying, boy, I'm here to rebuild the wall, you guys need to get on it, he didn't tell anybody what he was there for. He went out at night, he rode out, he looked at all the damage, he surveyed what had to be done. He knew what was ahead of him before he ever approached him and said, this is what we're going to do. The short version, the short lesson of Nehemiah that you always hear, which is a really true lesson, well, I guess we'll get to that in a minute. But, Nehemiah, he is into this, but now he is running into this deal that this is a daunting task. And in order to get this done, which is a big lesson in Nehemiah, in order to get this done, he said, listen, we're not all going to group up, right? We're not all going to group up and all go out and rebuild this wall. We're not going to do that, right? What we're going to do is you're all going to build the wall basically in front of your own house. In other words, don't worry about all of this. And that's a big lesson in life, right? Don't worry about all this stuff, because that's what life does. Sometimes you get up in the morning and you think, oh, I'm going to get this done. I've got all this stuff to do. If you wake up in the morning and you think, I got to do this, chances are, if you're me, you're not going to get anything accomplished before noon, because you're going to be running around trying to figure out everything that you got to do, right? But if you go in and you say, and you don't look at the whole picture, I've been a mechanic my whole life, and people will come in and they'll see an engine in 1,000 parts laying on a floor out of a truck, all scattered everywhere, right? And they'll say, can you ever remember how to put that back together? I had an instructor years ago when I was up at OSU in the diesel shop, and these guys would take these engines apart and they would lay all these parts out real neat and everything stacked together and everything on their table. And in the morning, he'd come out and kick all their tables over, because, and people say, well, how do you do it? Well, you do it one bolt at a time. That's how you build an engine, one bolt at a time. You don't look at the whole thing. You think, I got to do this, and I got to do this, and I got to do this. Nehemiah was the same way. He said, don't look at everything, because if you do, you're just going to get discouraged, because you're going to think, I can't do all this, right? Don't look at everything. Just look at this part of the wall. You build this part of the wall right here. You build this gate right here. You build this gate over here. And you don't look at everything around you. You just do what you got to do. What's in front of you, that's what you need to do. Do what's in front of you. And Nehemiah, that's what he does at the beginning of this. He gives all these people their task. And if you read Nehemiah 3, interestingly enough, it's in a past tense. So a lot of people think Nehemiah 3 was written after the fact. It went back to, this had been done, in other words. But this is the people that did it, and it's how they accomplished the task. They each took and they did what they needed to do. And he separates all this out by people, by what they did and how they did it. And actually, this is the most complete description we have of Jerusalem out of the book of Nehemiah, because it goes through all these different areas, all these different things that they did, and it goes to one at a time that they repaired this. They repaired another section. See, they repaired another section. They hung the doors. They hung the gate. They did this. They did the bolts and the bars. Sal the son, the official of the district of Mizpah, he repaired the fountain gate. So Nehemiah was really good about putting these people in their own place. Now, the other thing you can say is in 17 of 3, after him, the Levites carried out repairs. So the priests were even working, interestingly enough, right? The priests were even helping. They were even repairing, doing the walls, setting the gates, doing all these things. So all these things in Nehemiah 3, they were getting done. And they were all working on these things they were doing, and things were moving along splendidly, right? We're getting all this done. We're building all this up. We're getting all this done. But then guess what? Then you got problems, right? I mean, that's how life works. So everything's going along swimmingly. We're building the wall, building the gate. Everybody's doing their own little thing. World's happy, right? But then guess what? You have outside problems. Nehemiah is a great book of the lesson of life, let me tell you. So then you think everything's going good, but guess what? Other people don't like it, right? So you got people on the outside that aren't even in Jerusalem, aren't even in Judea, or in your own life, when we're trying to do things, build our little section of wall in our own little life, right? All of a sudden somebody comes along from the outside and says, oh, I don't like what you're doing. Or you can't get that done, or you're never going to finish this. Discouragers, right? Discouragers. They come along and they say, you're not going to get this done. So this is what happens. So what are these feeble Jews doing, right? This is discouragement. Are they going to restore it for themselves? Can they offer sacrifices? Can they finish in a day? Can they revive the stones from the dusty rubble, even the burned ones? Even what they are building, if a fox should jump on it, he would break their stone wall down. So you got discouragers. You always have discouragers in life. There's always people who say, can't be done, you can't do it, tried that before, nobody can accomplish that. Always, doesn't matter what you're trying to do. There's always somebody who says, that probably won't work, right? I mean, that's life. And that's the same thing that's going on here. So it's not just that they don't want it built, so we're going to discourage them. Return their reproach. Give them up for plunder. Don't forgive their iniquities. Let their sin be blotted out. So they have demoralized the builders. So these people are trying to build the wall, but guess what? Everybody's saying, oh, you're just, we're going to tear it down if you build it. That wall's no good. You can't build this out of nothing. You don't have what it takes. You're not qualified to build the wall. So they're demoralizing them. So he said, so he built the wall, and the whole wall was joined together to half its height, for the people had a mind to work. So even though they demoralized them, Nehemiah, and I think this is the part we kind of miss, it's built to half the height, right? In other words, this isn't done. But I think the reason you see that in the text is because Nehemiah, where the others are saying, oh, you can't do it, you're no good, it's not going to work. I think Nehemiah's on the other side saying, look, we're half done, right? And look at this. This is a good wall. This wall's 9 feet thick. That's a thick wall. You know what? 9 feet. That's a lot of rock. I don't care how you slice it, especially to carry by hand. So he says, look at what you've done. Look what you've accomplished. Don't listen to what they're saying. Look at what you've done. And I think that's such an important lesson in life. It's so easy to get discouraged when things don't work. Trust me, you're talking to a man who knows all about that. You can beat your head against the wall about something. Sometimes I get a truck, I can't fix it, and I mean, literally, it drives me nuts. You can ask Susie, she can tell you. I go home and talk to her about it. She'll go down and talk with me about it. Just can drive you nuts. Hours and hours, you can't figure it out. And pretty soon you think, this thing's never going to work. These things just don't work, right? And so sometimes when you get that way, you just got to go find one that works and get in it and go take a drive and say, yeah, they do work, right? This can work. I always think of the show, and Bill always laughs at me because I never can remember the name of the show. But anyway, what was the name of the show, Bill? Can't remember. The guy with the bear that kills the bear. Huh? Yeah, The Edge. always think of that show, The Edge. You ever see that? Where he goes and and the bear's gonna get him, and they think the bear's gonna kill him, and there's a matchbook cover, and it shows them killing this bear with these spears. And he says, good show, you ought to watch it. And he says, if they did it, we can do it. And I always remember that. I need to remember the name of that movie, but anyway, that's one thing in a movie. I don't remember a lot in movies, but I always remember that. If they can do it, we can do it. You know, if somebody else can accomplish it, then I can accomplish it. You know, I mean, because we're accomplished people, right? I mean, just give yourself a pat on the back. There's nobody in here that's not an accomplished person. Nobody in here that doesn't have talent and intelligence and the ability to do great things. And if other people can accomplish those things, we can accomplish those things in life. And I think that's something that's what Nehemiah is saying, you know, to them people. He's saying, look at what you've done. Look at how much you've built. You're going to finish. You can finish, right? Because you've done this much already. And so I think he is encouraging them, and they're discouraged. So they get it done, and they have a mind to work. But then they say, okay, the discouragement's not working, right? And the breaches are being closed, and they got really mad. So now it's more than discouragement. Now they say, guess what? We're going to come fight you over it. You know, we can't discourage you and make you quit building it. So we're going to come and have war with you. We're going to come and fight you. We're going to physically stop you from building the wall. So Nehemiah, being the guy Nehemiah is, Nehemiah says, Nehemiah's a solution guy. Y'all get that picture in this thing? Nehemiah's a solution guy. He's not a guy that runs or hides or fears. Nehemiah is a guy that when you come to Nehemiah with a problem, Nehemiah is thinking of a solution to the problem. And so Nehemiah thinks, okay, so they're going to come and do that, right? And they're going to come and they're going to sneak up on us and they're going to kill us and they're going to put a stop to the work. And he says they're going to come up against us, told us 10 times. So Nehemiah says, all right, so we're going to be ready. So I'm going to station people at the lowest parts of the wall, the exposed places, with spears and bows. When I saw their fear, I rose and spoke to the nobles, the rest of the people. Don't be afraid of them. Remember the Lord, who is great and awesome. This is the encouragement of Nehemiah. Fight for your brothers, your sons, your daughters, your wives, your houses. A reason to fight. A reason to fight. You know, he's talking about Ukraine, and, you know, honestly, I thought Russia would march through Ukraine in like 4 hours and 35 minutes. You know what I mean? I really did. And, you know, it's reminiscent to me of Hitler and Poland, right? Hitler goes through Poland in a day, right? Hitler takes Poland in a day during World War II. And, but these people are fighting for their lives. I mean, they have something to lose. You know, when you talk about a lot of those Russian soldiers, they're demoralized. They're not really wanting to be in this fight. But these Ukrainians, they have something to lose. You know, and that's exactly what Nehemiah is telling these people, these Jews in Judah. He says, you have something to lose. He says, you got your wives, your daughters, your family, your brothers, your sisters. You have something to lose. You know, you need to fight. You need to be ready because you have something to fight for. And he says, when the enemies heard that God, if they all return to the wall, so everybody goes back. But then Nehemiah says, from that day on, he says, half my servants carried on the work, while half of them held the spears, the shields, the bows, the breastplates. The captains were behind the whole house of Judah. Those who were building the wall, who carried the burdens, took their load with one hand doing the work and the other holding a weapon. That's what Sherry talked about Sunday morning. You know, in other words, we're going to finish this one way or another, and if that means we got to hold a brick in one hand and a sword in the other hand, then it doesn't matter. You know, we're going to finish this wall. Nehemiah was a guy who provided a solution to the problem. He says, you all have to be warriors. You're going to have to stand up and fight, and if you need to be ready, right? You need to be a deterrent against these people. Until you can get this wall. And that speeds them up, because if we can get this wall done, we're protected from these people. But until we get this wall done, we're not protected. You know, we have to protect ourselves. And so he says the work, and then he said to the nobles, the work is great and extensive, and we are separated, far from one another. But we're going to blow the trumpet, and wherever you hear that sound, everybody come running, and God will fight for us. So, you know, I think Nehemiah is a realistic guy. I like to think I'm a realistic Christian. I think some people are not realistic in their faith. You know, I really do. But I think Nehemiah was realistic. Nehemiah knew God was going to support them. God was going to provide the victory. But Nehemiah knew that in order to do that, they was going to have to carry a sword. I mean, Nehemiah knew they couldn't just say, oh, God, take care of us and everything's going to be wonderful, right? I mean, he knew there was their part and God's part. And he knew God would provide the victory, but he never said, we don't have to be prepared, right? We don't have to be ready. So many times people look at God like this magical, he's going to fix everything in your life and, miraculously do things. Truth is, God will aid us, comfort us, guide us, mentor us, do all these things for us. But, very few places in the Bible does God ever do something without somebody doing something. I think it's that old adage that's probably in Regulations chapter 3, right? God helps those who help themselves, right? Like Regulations 3, verse 4. I think that there's truth behind that saying, right? There's truth behind that mentality. And I think Nehemiah knew that. Nehemiah knew, God's going to give us a victory. God's going to provide, but we're going to be, we're still going to be ready, and we're going to have to do our part in this thing too. So, I think Nehemiah is really realistic in his faith and in what. And God never came to Nehemiah and said, Nehemiah, I'm going to let you complete this work, and I'm going to take care of you. He never sent a prophet to Nehemiah that said, God's going to handle this. Nehemiah was doing what Nehemiah knew because of his own faith, what Nehemiah needed to do. Nehemiah is a great example of faith in God and perseverance and self-will and determination and free will. Nehemiah encompasses all those things in a really great fashion. And I think it's something you can really carry forward into modern-day Christianity, into us, into what we are with God. Are there any comments? So, it says they took them all the time. Didn't take off their clothes, didn't bathe. Was probably a stinky job. None of us removed our clothes. Each took his weapon even to the water. So they knew that they were vulnerable as long as that wall wasn't completed. They knew there was a threat. And yet Nehemiah mitigated the threat by what he did. So it says, then, now you have internal problems. So you got external problems. Discouragement, people wanting to come stop you, physically stop you. So that's part of life. That's part of it. But then you have internal problems, right? So you got problems on every side. That's life. That's how it is, right? If you think everything's good out there, probably something's not good in here. I always think of the church when I think of Nehemiah, because that's kind of how we are in the body of Christ. Sometimes we have external problems, people who maybe attack us or derate us or discourage us. And then sometimes we have internal conflict, right? People are dissatisfied or unhappy, or somebody does something that upsets somebody. So you always have both these factors involved, I think, whether it's in the church or in life. And so now they're upset because basically what's happening here, in a nutshell, I'll give you the Rex summary. Basically what's happening here is the rich people are taking advantage of the poor people, right? In other words, grain's scarce, things are scarce, people have land, everybody got their land allotment back, got their places back. So people are going in, the people who have, the haves, are taking into the have-nots, and they're charging them usury, right? Interest. They're loaning them money. They're taking their stuff, right? And when they don't pay, guess what they're doing? Right? Keith knows all about this. They don't pay their bills, so they're coming to get their stuff. Big problems with this in Judaism, I might add. Goes all the way back to the law. Nehemiah is going to go all the way back to the law on this, because this is a big deal. Because God told the Jewish people when Moses came down from the mount, God said that Jews weren't allowed to do what to each other? Huh? They weren't allowed to sue, but more importantly than that, they weren't allowed to charge interest. Yeah, you were not supposed to charge interest to a fellow Jew. You could do it to an outsider. You could charge a foreigner all you wanted. But brothers weren't supposed to charge brothers. Why did God do that? What was the point of that coming off the mount? What was God's? And there's another thing God said. Let's talk about two different things at once. The other thing God said is that if you loan another Jew money against his possessions and he doesn't pay you, you can't go get his stuff. You can't. You can't repossess his stuff. You can't go get his stuff. Even if he doesn't pay you, you can't do that. And the other thing is, you cannot take, according to the law of Moses, if you loan against a millstone, you can never take a millstone. You also can never take a person's cloak under the law. Period. You could never do that. Why did God do that? What's the deal about a millstone? What's a millstone do? Number one, grinds flour. It's your living, right? Right. You couldn't take it. Right? And your cloak was your outer garment, what you used for a pillow, what you used as a cover up. You couldn't take that. You could not take that. God was doing that, and the reason God did that is because God said, number one, I'm giving you everything you have. I'm giving you your land. I'm giving you your wealth. You're slaves, right? So literally everything you have, I'm giving it to you, right? So you can't charge somebody because guess what? It's really not yours, right? It's mine. So you can't charge people interest. You can't charge a brother interest. And then under Jewish law, right, under the law, every 50th year, right, year of Jubilee, right? What happened on the year of Jubilee? Got it back. So if I loaned Mark money for a field and I used that year of Jubilee, I had to give it back to him. So God, and the reason God did that is because God divided everything by family, by allotment, and God didn't want the family, the allotment, not to have an inheritance. And the only way he could do that was protect that land, right? So you couldn't take the land out of the family. It had to go back. That's the reason God did that. So Nehemiah is going to the same thing, and he's saying we've borrowed money for the king's tax, our vineyards, right? And now we're being sold into slavery. We're being sold into bondage. Our stuff's being taken. You're exacting usury from his brother. Look at the exclamation point. There's not really exclamation points in Hebrew, I might point out. But there is the idea of this intonation. You're exacting usury. In other words, you're taking interest. You're charging interest on it. So he said, we, according to our ability, have redeemed our Jewish brothers who were sold to the nations. How would you even sell your brothers that they may be sold to us? In other words, how can you take your brothers into bondage? How can you do that when we've been redeemed from this nation that's taken us? And when he approached them with this, I think it's a touchy subject. Don't you? Money's a touchy subject. Do you agree with me? People's money is a touchy subject. So when Nehemiah comes in and says this to them, he's in a touchy situation. How are they going to respond? What are they going to do? Because he needs these wealthy people to get this stuff done too. So he puts it into God's way. Shouldn't you walk in the fear of God? In other words, he's putting that, look at what God would have you do. Not what Nehemiah would have you do, but look at what God would have you do, right? Give them back their fields, their vineyards, their olive groves. Also, the 100th part of the money and of the grain, the new wine. And they said, we will give it back and require nothing. We'll do exactly as you say. So Nehemiah used God's law. Nehemiah didn't say, oh, you're doing wrong. This is what Nehemiah said, what would God have you do? What did God tell you to do? You see? And I think that's a big thing in conflict, internal conflict, especially in the church. It's not what Rex would have you do or what anybody here would have you do. It's what God would have you do. Right? What would God have you do? And I think you have to ask those questions when we're dealing with brothers and sisters in Christ. We're different with each other. We should be. We're supposed to be than with the world. We're supposed to treat each other different. We're supposed to act differently. We're supposed to, give preference to one another. Right? It's different. Yeah. 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 Yeah, once you draw that line and say, no, we're not going to do it, then, right. I mean, they're going to. So what's it worth, right? I guess that's what Nehemiah is saying, what's it worth? If we're going to get this done, we got to do it together. And if you separate us, we're never going to get this done. I mean, absolutely. I mean, he looked at God's law and said, this is what God would have you. This is who God would have you be, not who you would be, not what the world would have you be, but this is who God would have you be. And I think that's, like I say, boy, the lessons in Nehemiah are profound. I mean, the very idea of what Nehemiah did, and I hope you take time really to read the book of Nehemiah. I know don't read all the, he had that, because that'll bog you down, but to read the big parts of Nehemiah, he took an oath from the priest to do that. So he not only did, he did an oath. And he said, may God shake out every man from his house and from his possessions who does not fulfill this promise. Even thus may he be shaken out and emptied. And all the assembly said, amen. They praised God. They did according to the promise. So things are going swimmingly now. We've got this problem taken care of, right? So we're doing better. We're doing better on that now than we were. And then Nehemiah is saying, listen, I'm not even taking what I should be taking. I'm not charging you tax. I'm not using the king's stuff. He says, the former governors who before me laid burdens on the people. He says, I'm not doing that. Bread, wine, 40 shekels of silver. He says, there were at my table 150 Jews and officials. Nehemiah is feeding 150 people out of his own pocket. Because Nehemiah wants to be above reproach of the people. Nehemiah wants to set the example. No, there's a lot of speculation about that. But Nehemiah, without using, he does have stipend from the king, from Persia. He does have some king's stipend. Right, but not from the Jews. He basically is saying, I'm not taking this from you. I'm not taking this from you. I'm not charging you tax so I can do this. Nehemiah is setting the example. He's setting the bar, right? And he says each day, this is what it takes each day: an ox, 6 sheep, birds, 1 and 10 days, sort of wine were furnished in abundance. That's a lot of stuff every day. That's per day, right? That's what it takes to feed all those people every day. So, Nehemiah is saying to them, he's saying, look at me. I'm setting the bar. I did not demand the governor's food allowance because the servitude was heavy on this people. And then instead of him saying, well, boy, look at me, look how good I am, he says, God, please remember me. God, remember me. I don't care what you guys think, but God, remember me for what I've done. He knows where his treasure is. He knows who he's trying to please. But he's setting the example by what he's doing. And so now that we're through all this problems, internal problems, external problems, all these problems, now they're coming against Nehemiah. Right? So we can't stop them. We can't discourage them. We can't fight them, So now the next best thing is let's get rid of that pesky Nehemiah. He's the guy that's causing all this problem anyway. So let's do away with him. So if everything else fails, kill the leader. Right? But Nehemiah's crafty, and Nehemiah knows what's going on. So they keep telling Nehemiah to come, and Nehemiah says, I'm not going to stop working to come to you. So 4 times they send it down there. Nehemiah says, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to quit working to come down there because I know that you mean me harm, you mean me bad, and I'm just not going to go do that. I have no reason to do that. And he says, well, we're going to send a letter to the king that says, guess what? You're getting ready to go to war. And Nehemiah basically says, you do you. You do what you got to do. You got to send a letter to the king, go ahead. But you got to remember, I'm here because the king said I could be here. I'm here because the king gave me this stuff to be here. I'm here on behalf of the king. So if you want to go send him a letter, just jump right on that thing, right? He says, you're inventing it in your own mind. He says, they're trying to frighten us, discourage us. He says, but he prays again, right? That's Nehemiah. He's always looking to God. Strengthen my hands. And even inside of Jerusalem, people are trying to get to him, trying to kill him. They're coming to kill you. They're coming to kill you at night. Come hide out. Come hide, because they're trying to kill you. But what does Nehemiah say? He says, should a man like me flee? And could one such as I go into the temple to save his life? I will not go in. You know, you just got to admire this guy, right? I mean, any way you look at Nehemiah, you just got to back up and think, man, he is a man's man. You know, you just got to admire this guy. I mean, everything he does is like above board, above the right thing. You know, I'm not going to hide. You know, my people are out there. They could die. Why would I go hide? Right? I'm not going to do that. I'm going to have the sword in my hand too. I'm going to have the brick in my hand. I'm going to be right out there working with them, because that's the kind of man Nehemiah is. I just think Nehemiah, we're out of time, but I just think Nehemiah, you can finish reading the rest of this, but, and I wish you would, because boy, you can just take so much great things out of the book of Nehemiah and put them in your own life. You know, a lot of times we look at Old Testament stuff and we think, oh, how's this apply? You know, how's this ever going to help me? And Nehemiah is one Old Testament book, literally. You could take and put it, it's kind of like Proverbs. You know, there's some good things in Proverbs too, but Nehemiah is one of them books you can read it and think, there's great application here in life, not just in the days of Nehemiah, but whether it's in the church or in a business or in my family or in my work life. There's great truths and great lessons that can be gleaned from the life of Nehemiah. And so I'm kind of glad we had a chance to look at Nehemiah, and I hope that you've enjoyed it. And I hope that you go back and look at it. But man, what a guy, huh? What a guy. Thanks for your time. She has who? Sue Bradley's at the ER, very sick and throwing up. Okay. Okay. All righty. And I got one of my employees in the hospital, Stephen, with a heartbeat like 32 beats a minute, so they don't know what's wrong with him. So anyway, I appreciate you praying for him too.